So here's all my equipment that I'll be using for an astrophotography session, hopefully tonight. It's looking a bit cloudy, but the prospects look good, so I just thought I'd run through what I've got and show you how it's all set up. So down on the floor here we have the CGX mount on its tripod. Got a dew shield there, mains power, the chair, vital part of every astronomy kit. We have the counterweights and their shaft. Got my briefcase there with all sorts of goodies in it, which we'll show you. We've got the camera bag with the goodies, even more goodies in it. Here's my Celestron 9.25 optical tube assembly. The green bit is a dew band. We've got the finder scope on there, star diagonal, and a simple lens, which is how I keep the thing nice and clean when I'm not using it. So this is the stable yard where I tend to do all my astrophotography. Down here on the floor we've got some U-tube angle iron, and that's bolted to the floor, and that ensures that when I start off a session my mount is always pointed in the same direction. Then got all my equipment, which I've just shown you, and here's the stable where I do all my photography, looking out onto the yard. And here, vital piece of kit, this is the mount for my monitor. Actually, we forgot about the monitors. Right, so this is my flats panel, and here is my 24-inch HD monitor. Here's get the CGX mount onto the rails on the yard and get it leveled. So I'm not going to try to struggle holding the camera while I try and pick the beast up, so back in a second. So here's the tripod with the mount, roughly north aligned using the U channels in the stable yard. And if we have a quick peek down here, there we go, that's nicely leveled. Okay, next we'll put on the counterweight arm, which goes on here, and the counterweights. Back in a second. So there's the counterweight shaft installed. First thing we need to do is take off the toe saver bolt. And there are my two counterweights installed in a position I know will be roughly good for the scope, and the toe saver bolt is back in place. Right, next to fit the optical tube assembly to the mount. So here we have the optical tube assembly actually mounted on the tripod and CGX mount. So we have the two clutches here and here, and we've then got the power connector and the two auxiliary ports here, and the power switch, and we've then got adjustment knobs for setting up the polar alignment, but we'll get around to that later. This is the place where the controller sits, and up here we have the connector for the dew band controller. So this is the content of my astrophotography briefcase, that thing down there. Let's just have a look what we've got here. So this is my DC distribution and fuse box. This is an AWOW NYI3 mini PC. This is a 10 amp 12 volt power supply along with its mains plug. This is an extension cable for that mains for the main supply. This 3D printed clip that ensures that these things don't disconnect mid-session. Here's my HDMI cable. This is the wiring harness for the DC distribution and for the PC to control the mount. Here we have some 3D printed clips that allow my flats panel to sit nicely on my OTA. We have my temperature and humidity sensor. This is, well, we'll show you what that does. That actually goes onto the mount and secures the wiring harness in place. This and its sister unit, which is somewhere, go onto the dovetail on the mount and allow the plate which the PC and fuse box are sat on to sit there. And this is another part of the cable securing unit for the cable harness. These two clips go through this bracket and the other bracket and are secured by these R clips to make sure the whole thing hangs where it should be. Over here we've got my Microsoft Surface 3, which is only low powered, but it's only used for remote access to the Astro PC, which drives the mount and the cameras. That's its mains cable. Here's its docking station, two head lights, a mouse and a backlit keyboard, which I use for driving the mount in the dark. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to attach the PC and the DC distribution and fuse box to the mount. So for that we need these two brackets. We need this clip, and these two. So we go over to the mount, loosen off this clutch, spin the OTA round so it's nice and level, flip that fuse back up again, pop the clips and things down there. Okay, so these two clips, especially 3D printed, one's got a star on it, one's got an earth on it, right, and the one with the star goes onto the end of the dovetail, slides down, oops, slides down to the mount like that. This one with the earth on it slides onto the bottom of the dovetail and it slides up to the mount like that. So we've then got a hole at this end, we've got a hole at that end, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to slot the plate that the PC is on onto that onto those two holes. And this is the PC and the DC distribution and fuse box. We've got, as this says here, AWL PC, so that's directly powered at 12 volts. We've got a flat panel, and that's this connector down here. We've got the dew band, and that's this controller here. And then we've got the mount, and that's connected via the wiring harness, which is here. So if we turn the plate over, we've got these two bosses, one at this end, one at that end, which go onto the mount. There's the flat panel control, there's the flat panel driver, that's the controller for the dew band, that's the power output to the mount, and this is that's the main power input to all of this, and that's the DC out to the mount. And this slot here is used for USB cable, which is in the wiring harness and just slots into one of the AWL PC slot USB slots. So the first thing I'm going to do is hook all of the hook the wiring harness onto this, and then we'll put this onto the CGX mount. So here is the plate with the PC and fuse box attached to the mount, and it's in its lowered position at the moment, which gives access to the wiring harness if necessary. Here's the dew band output that's connected onto the output from the fuse box. There's the flat panel for easy access, and there's the dew band temperature control there. At this end we've got the three wires coming out, USB power for the mount and power in. Now down here, this little unit here is a clip which grasps the cables, and I'll show you what that goes on to next. This is a special clip I designed and 3D printed, and it's got a cutout there which is a dovetail type joint. And what happens with this is especially designed to clip onto this ridged area on the this part of the mount. So there you go, nice and secure. And the dovetail then hangs down, and this dovetail here then clips into that, which I shall do now. So there's the wiring harness from the PC and DC distribution, nice and secured and close to the point of rotation. And then further down the cable we have another one of these clips, and that needs to go onto here, which is where the DC power into the mount goes, but there's nowhere obvious to secure this, so that's the next thing. Here's the next 3D printed piece of trickery. Right, so those posts are designed to slot into some bolt holes on the mount, and this hole here slots over the power connector, which means that when the power connector for the mount is then screwed down, it retains the back end of this mount, and up the top here we have another dovetail joint for the cable clip to go into. So I'll go and mount this on to the mount. There's lots of mounts in here, isn't there? And show you that. So there is the retaining clip. So it's over the power connector here, and these two screw holes on either side. These posts that are on the actual plastic mount are an interference fit with them, so they get pushed in, then it gets secured here, and then it's nice and secure. So I'll just attach the DC power and put the cable clip in place. So there we have DC power to the mount. That bolt there, or screw rather, is holding the this end of the plate on, and we've then got the cable coming down from the PC up here, and the only cables going to the mount are this one, which is for DC input at 12 volts, and this USB extension cable, which is used for connecting to the USB port on the bottom of the controller. And here is that controller. This is standard Celestron Nexstar GEM controller. However, it's been slightly modified. On the bottom there's an up angle USB mini connector, and on the back that allows me to then, with these couple of cable clips here, take the USB cable nice and neatly, giving a nice low profile that still goes into the holder on the mount, and then the USB cable is then fed up through the curly cable and pops out at the end. So we've only got one cable, and it's nice and neat and safe, and that's the cable that goes into the mount. So I'll go and connect those up now. Here's the Celestron CGX GEM controller. What looks like a single cable. Put that back in the holder. And here we've got the joint for the USB up to the Astro PC, and then that just goes into one of the auxiliary ports on the mount. So that means that the only cable going to the mount at all is this one, which is for DC power, which is what we'll hook up next. So there's the mains coming from one of the external mains connectors on the stable wall to an extension lead, to the 12 volt 10 amp power supply. Here's the output from that, and here's the power connector for the mount and all its associated electronics. And this little thing is just a little 3D printed clip, which has got the right size connectors slots on either end. It just makes sure that the two cables don't become disconnected if they get tugged. So I'll just fix that. So that's that done. Okay, the next thing to do is to finish off connecting things up and to put the camera and other equipment onto the OTA. So here is the contents of my camera bag. You've got a Canon EOS 650D DSLR camera. I've got a curly mini USB cable for connecting that to the Astro PC. We've got a USB curly Type C there, and that's for connecting the guide camera. Got a cable for connecting my external SSD drive. This is a simple mount for connecting the camera directly to the CGX mount, rather than having the OTA attached. So if I want to do wide field photography, I can do. That's using that little clip on the bottom. There's a 1.25 adapter for the 650D if I want to attach the camera directly to the back of the scope. These four things rather, allow me to, this is an off-axis guider, and these adapters allow me to connect the 120D mini camera, which is an ZWA ASI 120mm mini, and this is a 3D printed micro focuser, which is non-rotating. This is a wireless hub which I use to access the PC on the mount from my Microsoft Surface. We've then got a 3x Barlow lens if we want to do really zoomed in stuff. We've got a focal reducer if we want to do wider field stuff than the OTA does at f10. I've got 2 spare batteries for the Canon. We've also got a remote shutter release for the Canon if we want to use that rather than hooking up the PC. So here is the Canon EOS 650D. It's got the off-axis guider, the non-rotating helical focuser, the 1.2 adapter, and the the ZWO ASI 120 mini guide camera. I've just got the cap on here to stop any dust getting in. The next thing we need to do is to take off the star diagonal and fit this in its place, and then the camera then fits onto there, as I'll show you shortly. So let's go and get the star diagonal off. Just comes off like that. Just pop it there for safety. And this adapter has got a conical section to it, so it just screws straight onto the back of the OTA. Like that. Then back to the camera. And these 2 screws and this little rub screw down here then go onto the back of that conical adapter. So that's all nicely aligned and safe and isn't going to fall off. And here's the Astro PC with the external SSD connected to it, to the USB-C port, and it's just held on just using double-sided Velcro tape. So I save all my images to this during an astrophotography session, and then take that off and take it to my high-end PC to do any processing that's required. Here is my flats panel, which is just one of those tracing light boxes that you can get off Amazon. I think this one cost about 40 quid. And these are clips which I've designed and printed on my 3D printer that clip over the edges of the panel and then sit inside the end of the OTA to make sure it's nice and stable and doesn't get blown off by the wind or anything. So what I'll do is I'll fit these now. I'll take the dew shield off the scope and get it vertical, and then we'll put this flats panel on the scope. And here is the flats panel with the 2 clips attached to it and the power connector. And there's the scope on the mount pointing vertically. So we'll now take the flats panel, pop it on top of the scope, and then we just plug it in down here. So here's the completed setup with my chair, my PC and its docking station, the USB hub, the keyboard, the mouse, the monitor, and there's the CGX mount with the Celestron 9.25 with its dew shield on it as well, and there's only a single cable going to it. It's all ready to roll. Very neat.